The chapel bells were ringing. 200 guests sat perfectly still in their Sunday best, eyes locked on the altar where Marcus stood, hands folded, heart pounding beneath his tailored suit. The choir's voices rose like prayers into the wooden beams overhead. Everything was perfect. Everything except one thing. The bride was missing. Behind the heavy oak doors of the bridal chamber, Elena pressed her back against the wall, her white dress crumpled in her trembling fists. Her breathing came fast and shallow. Sweat beaded on her forehead, despite the cool autumn air. She could hear them whispering outside, wondering, worrying. Her mother's voice cut through the murmurs, sharp with panic. But Elena couldn't move. She stared at her hands, watching them shake, watching something beneath her skin begin to shimmer like moonlight on water. This was the moment she'd feared her entire life, the moment when love and truth would collide, and she'd have to choose. What if they saw? What if he saw? What if the man she loved more than breathing looked at her and saw not a woman, but a monster? Stay with me until the end, because what happens next will change everything you thought you knew about love, identity, and the secrets we bury to survive. Out in the chapel, Marcus checked his watch for the third time. His best man, David, leaned in close and whispered something reassuring, but Marcus barely heard it. His mind was already running through possibilities. Cold feet, family drama. He'd known Elena for 3 years, loved her for every single day of them, and he'd never seen her afraid of anything. That's what drew him to her in the first place. That quiet strength. That mystery in her eyes, like she carried an ocean of untold stories. But now, standing at this altar, he wondered if there was something she'd never told him, something she couldn't tell him. Inside the bridal chamber, Elena's mother Grace stood on the other side of the door, her knuckles white against the wood. She knew. God help her. She knew exactly what was happening. She'd warned Elena about this day since she was 16 years old. Since the night Elena came home from the woods with dirt under her fingernails and no memory of how she got there. Since the morning they found a snakeskin in her bed and Elena looked at it like she recognized it. What secret had Elena carried all these years? What truth was fighting to break free on the day she was supposed to become someone's wife? And would love be enough to survive it? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Elena Marie Crawford was born on a night when the moon disappeared. Her mother Grace went into labor 3 weeks early in their small home on the edge of Millbrook, Georgia, a town where everyone knew everyone and secrets didn't stay buried long. Grace's husband had left 2 months before Elena was born. Some said he ran off with a woman from Savannah. Others whispered darker things. Things about what he'd seen in his wife's eyes one night when she thought he was sleeping. Grace delivered Elena alone, her screams swallowed by the thick Georgia pines surrounding their property. When the baby finally came, slick and wailing, Grace noticed it immediately. A birthmark on Elena's lower back, shaped like interlocking scales, dark as riverstone. Grace's grandmother had the same mark. So did her great-aunt, who drowned herself in Lake Catherine when Grace was just a girl. They called it the serpent's kiss in the old country, back in West Africa, where Grace's ancestors were stolen from. A mark that meant the child carried something ancient in her blood, something that didn't belong entirely to the human world. Grace wrapped her daughter tight and made a decision that night. She would raise Elena in the church. She would pray over her every morning and every night. She would teach her to be good, to be normal, to bury whatever wildness lived inside her. And for years it worked. Elena grew up shy and careful. She wore long sleeves even in summer. She never learned to swim, even though all the other kids spent their summers at the lake. She was pretty in that way that made boys nervous, with deep brown skin, large dark eyes, and hair she kept braided tight against her scalp. But there were signs, small things Grace tried to ignore. The way Elena could find things that were lost, like she could sense them in the earth. The way animals watched her, especially the ones that should have been afraid. The stray dogs that followed her home. The hawks that perched outside her window. And the snakes, always the snakes. They never bit her, never even hissed. They'd curl near her feet when she sat outside, like they were listening to her breathe. When Elena was 13, something happened that Grace could no longer explain away. Elena had been walking home from school when four boys from her class cornered her near the woods. They were older, mean in that casual way some boys are when they think no one's watching. They mocked her clothes, her silence, the way she always seemed different. One of them grabbed her backpack. Another shoved her. Elena remembered falling. She remembered her hands hitting the dirt. And then she remembered nothing until she woke up hours later in those same woods. Her clothes torn, her mouth tasting like copper and soil. The four boys were found the next morning, alive but traumatized, babbling about a girl who became something else. Something with eyes that glowed and a voice that wasn't human. The police wrote it off as teenagers on drugs. But Grace knew. That night, she sat Elena down at their kitchen table and told her the truth about their bloodline, about the women before them who carried the spirit of Nagu, the serpent guardian from the old stories, a protector, a shapeshifter, a creature caught between two worlds. Elena was 16 when she first transformed fully. It happened in her sleep. She woke up coiled on her bedroom floor, her human consciousness trapped inside a body that moved on instinct, tasting the air with a forked tongue, feeling vibrations through her belly scales. She panicked and the panic brought her back, snapping her into her human form so violently she vomited and sobbed for an hour. Grace held her and whispered the same thing over and over. You are not a monster. You are protected. You are loved. But Elena didn't feel loved. She felt cursed. She stopped going out, stopped making friends. She graduated high school a year early and got a job at the town library where she could disappear into books in silence. She convinced herself she'd live alone forever, that she'd never risk letting anyone close enough to see what she really was. And then, on a rainy Tuesday in October, Marcus walked into the library. Marcus Green was new to Millbrook. He'd moved from Atlanta after his father passed, taking over the family's construction business and trying to build a quieter life. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with kind eyes and a laugh that made people feel safe. He came into the library looking for books on architecture and left with Elena's phone number. She didn't know why she said yes when he asked her to coffee. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, not like she was strange, but like she was a mystery worth solving. Maybe it was because he didn't push, didn't pry, just listened when she talked and made her feel like her silence was okay too. They fell in love the way people do in small towns, slowly and then all at once. Dinners at the diner, long drives with no destination, nights sitting on his porch talking about everything and nothing. Marcus saw Elena as strong, thoughtful, a little guarded, but worth the patience. He didn't know that some nights she'd wake up drenched in sweat, her skin tingling, fighting the urge to run into the woods and let go of her human shape. He didn't know that she avoided mirrors on certain days because she'd see her eyes flash yellow. He didn't know that when he held her hand, she could feel her pulse sinking with something older, something that wanted to coil around him and never let go. When Marcus proposed, he did it simply. No grand gesture, just the two of them by the lake at sunset, and a ring his grandmother had worn. Elena looked at that ring and felt her heart crack open. She wanted to say yes. She wanted the life he was offering, but she also knew what saying yes would mean. A wedding, vows, witnesses, a moment when all eyes would be on her, and the thing inside her might decide it was tired of hiding. Her mother begged her not to go through with it. Grace sat her down a week before the wedding and said the words she'd been holding back for years. If you marry him without telling him the truth, you'll lose him when he finds out, and he will find out. Elena knew her mother was right, but she also knew that telling Marcus the truth meant risking everything. How do you tell the man you love that you're not entirely human? That under stress or fear or even passion, you might become something he's been taught to fear his entire life? So Elena made a choice. She'd go through with the wedding, she'd hold herself together, she'd be normal just long enough to say I do. And then maybe she could find a way to tell him after. Maybe love would be enough. But the night before the wedding, Elena dreamed. She dreamed of being trapped underwater, her lungs screaming, her body twisting. She dreamed of shedding her skin and emerging as something sleek and powerful and free. She dreamed of Marcus reaching for her and recoiling in horror. She woke up gasping, and when she looked down at her arms, she saw the faint shimmer of scales just beneath the surface of her skin, there and gone like a trick of the light. The morning of the wedding, Elena stood in front of the mirror in her mother's house, wearing the white dress they'd spent months choosing. She looked beautiful. She also looked terrified. Grace stood behind her, hands on her shoulders, and said quietly, "You don't have to do this." But Elena shook her head. "I love him, Mama. I can't lose him." Grace kissed her daughter's forehead and said nothing. What could she say? That love wasn't always enough? That some truths demanded to be seen? Elena arrived at the church with her bridesmaids, smiling through her nerves, accepting hugs and compliments. But as the ceremony grew closer, something began to shift. She felt it in her bones first, a deep ache like her skeleton was trying to rearrange itself. Then in her skin, a tightness, a heat. She excused herself to the bridal chamber, telling everyone she needed a moment. But the moment stretched, and the thing inside her grew louder. It whispered in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves. "Why do you hide? Why do you shrink yourself for him? Show him. Show them all." Elena pressed her hands to her chest, trying to calm her racing heart. But her hands were trembling, and beneath her skin, something was moving. Outside the door, her maid of honor knocked softly. "Elena, honey, everyone's waiting. Are you okay?" Elena opened her mouth to answer, but what came out wasn't her voice. It was a low hiss, sharp and cold. The maid of honor stepped back, startled. "Elena?" Inside the chapel, Marcus checked his watch again. It had been 20 minutes. David put a hand on his shoulder. "You want me to go check on her?" Marcus nodded, his stomach twisting with worry. But before David could move, the doors to the bridal chamber swung open. Elena stood there, her dress wrinkled, her hair slightly undone, her eyes wide and wet with tears. She looked at Marcus across the crowded room, and he saw something in her face he'd never seen before. Raw, unfiltered fear. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can't do this." And then she ran. If your heart is racing right now, type "I'm still watching" in the comments, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Marcus didn't think. He just moved. He pushed through the crowd of confused guests, ignoring the gasps and whispers, and ran after Elena. She was fast, faster than he expected, already halfway across the church parking lot by the time he made it outside. "Elena, wait, please." She didn't stop. She ran toward the woods that bordered the church property, her white dress catching on branches, her bare feet pounding against the dirt. Marcus followed, his dress shoes slipping on the uneven ground. He didn't care. All he knew was that the woman he loved was running from him, and he had no idea why. "Elena, please, just talk to me." She stopped suddenly, so suddenly that Marcus almost crashed into her. She stood with her back to him, her shoulders heaving, her hands clenched into fists. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw. "You don't know me, Marcus. You think you do, but you don't." Marcus stepped closer, his heart pounding. "Then tell me. Whatever it is, just tell me." Elena laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound. "You won't believe me. Try me." She turned to face him, and Marcus's breath caught. Her eyes were different. Not brown anymore, but a bright, unnatural yellow, glowing faintly in the shadows of the trees. He blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light, but when he opened his eyes, they were still there, still glowing. "Elena." "What, Marcus? I'm not like you." Her voice cracked. "I'm not like anyone. I've been hiding it my whole life, but I can't anymore. I thought I could hold it together for one day, but I can't." Marcus's mind raced. He didn't understand. "Hiding what? What are you talking about?" Elena's hands trembled as she held them up, and Marcus watched in horror as her fingers began to elongate, the skin darkening, hardening, becoming something slick and scaled. "No," Elena whispered, her voice thick with panic. "No, no, not now." But her body wasn't listening. The transformation was slow, agonizing. Her bones shifted with audible cracks. Her skin split and reformed, scales spreading across her arms, her neck, her face. She fell to her knees, gasping, and Marcus stumbled backward, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. The woman he loved was changing. Her legs fused together, her spine elongated, her dress tearing as her body grew and twisted into something massive, something powerful, something inhuman. Within moments, where Elena had stood, there was now a serpent, easily 12 feet long, thick as a man's torso, covered in dark, iridescent scales that shimmered green and gold in the fading light. Her head was triangular, elegant, her eyes still that same glowing yellow. And those eyes were locked on Marcus. He should have run. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run. But he didn't, because even in this form, even as a creature he couldn't name or understand, he recognized her. He saw the fear in those eyes, the shame, the heartbreak. "Elena," he whispered, his voice shaking. The serpent lowered her head, and a sound came from deep in her throat. Not a hiss, but something closer to a sob. Behind them, the search party had arrived, Grace leading the way, followed by David, the bridesmaids, and a handful of guests who'd been brave or curious enough to follow. They stopped cold when they saw the massive serpent coiled in the clearing and Marcus standing just a few feet away. Screams erupted. Someone shouted to call the police. Someone else yelled about getting a gun. Grace pushed through the crowd, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Stop! All of you, stop!" She moved toward the serpent slowly, her hands raised. "Elena, baby, it's okay." "You're okay." The serpent turned toward her mother, and for a moment Marcus saw something flicker in her eyes. Recognition. Grief. Grace knelt in the dirt, ignoring the gasp behind her, and reached out to touch her daughter's scaled head. "You are not a monster," Grace said firmly. "You hear me? You are not a monster." But the crowd didn't see it that way. They saw a creature, a threat, something that didn't belong. And when Elena shifted her massive body, instinct took over. She moved between Marcus and the advancing crowd, her body coiling protectively around him. A warning hiss erupted from her throat, low and menacing. The crowd froze, and Marcus, trapped within the protective curve of her body, looked up at the serpent that had been his bride and made a choice. He reached out slowly and placed his hand on her scales. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not afraid." For a long moment, no one moved. The forest was silent except for the sound of Elena's breathing, a deep rhythmic hiss that vibrated through the ground. Marcus kept his hand on her scales, feeling the warmth beneath, the rapid pulse of her heartbeat. He didn't understand what was happening. He didn't understand how the woman he loved had become this. But he understood one thing. She was protecting him, not attacking, protecting. Grace spoke again, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "She's not going to hurt anyone. She never has. This is who she's always been. Part of her anyway." One of the guests, an older man named Mr. Holloway who'd known Grace since childhood, stepped forward cautiously. "Grace, what in God's name is that thing?" "That thing," Grace said sharply, "is my daughter. And she's not a thing. She's a person cursed with something she didn't choose, and has spent her whole life trying to hide so people like you wouldn't look at her the way you're looking at her right now." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some people began to back away. Others stayed, frozen between fear and fascination. Marcus looked up at Elena, at the serpent she'd become, and spoke directly to her. "Elena, if you can hear me, if you can understand me, I need you to change back. Please, I'm not going anywhere. But you have to come back." The serpent's eyes locked on his, and for a moment, Marcus thought he saw tears. Then slowly the transformation began again. It was just as painful, just as brutal. Her body convulsed, scales retracting, bones cracking back into place. She cried out, a sound that was part human, part something else entirely, and Marcus caught her as she collapsed, naked and trembling, back into her human form. Someone in the crowd threw a jacket, and Marcus wrapped it around her, holding her close as she sobbed against his chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered over and over. "I'm so sorry." Marcus held her tighter. Don't apologize." The crowd slowly dispersed, some whispering, some silent, all of them shaken. Grace stayed, kneeling beside her daughter and the man who still held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. David approached cautiously, his face pale. "Marcus, man, are you okay?" Marcus looked up at his best friend, his jaw set. "I'm fine, and so is she." David glanced at Elena, still shaking in Marcus's arms, and nodded slowly. "Okay, okay, man, whatever you need." Marcus turned his attention back to Elena, gently tilting her face up to meet his eyes. "Look at me." She did, her eyes red and swollen, still faintly golden at the edges. "I don't understand what just happened," Marcus said quietly, "and I'm going to need you to explain it to me. But I need you to know something first. I love you. Not the version of you that you thought you had to be. Not the woman you were pretending to be to make me comfortable. I love you. All of you. Even the parts you were afraid to show me." Elena's breath hitched. "How can you say that? You saw what I am." "I saw who you are," Marcus corrected. "And I'm still here." Grace wiped her eyes and placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "There's more you need to know about where this comes from, about what it means." Marcus nodded. "Then tell me everything." Grace took a deep breath and began. "It started generations ago, back in West Africa, in a village where my ancestors came from. There was a guardian spirit, Nagu, a great serpent who protected the people from harm. When danger came, Nagu would take human form and walk among them, warning them, guiding them. But Nagu fell in love with a human man, and in that love, she bound herself to his bloodline. From that union came children who carried both human and serpent blood. They could shift between forms, especially in times of great emotion or danger. It's been passed down through the women in our family for generations. Some of us carry the mark but never transform. Others, like Elena, carry the full gift." "Gift?" Elena said bitterly. "It's a curse." Grace shook her head. "It's a gift, baby. You're a protector. That's what Nagu's children were always meant to be. You don't transform to hurt. You transform to protect. That's why you shifted today. You sensed danger. You felt threatened. And your body responded the only way it knew how." Marcus absorbed this, his mind working through the impossible. "So she's not dangerous?" "Not unless someone threatens the people she loves," Grace said. "Then she's the most dangerous thing you'll ever meet." Marcus looked down at Elena, who was watching him with a mixture of hope and terror. He thought about the past 3 years, the way she always seemed to sense when he was upset before he said anything, the way she'd once grabbed his arm and pulled him back from stepping into traffic without even looking, the way animals gravitated toward her. It all made sense now in a strange, impossible way. "Elena," Marcus said slowly, "do you have control over it? Can you choose when to change?" Elena shook her head. "Not really. It happens when I'm scared or angry, or sometimes when I'm asleep. I've been fighting it my whole life, trying to keep it buried. But today, at the wedding, with everyone watching, with so much pressure, I couldn't hold it back anymore. And I thought if you saw, you'd leave. So I ran." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he stood, helping Elena to her feet, keeping the jacket wrapped around her. He looked at the scattered remains of their wedding party, at the empty chapel in the distance, at the sun beginning to set through the trees. And then he looked at Elena. "I don't want to leave. I want to marry you. Today. Right now." Elena blinked. "What?" "You heard me," Marcus said. "I don't care if it's in a church or in the woods or in a parking lot. I don't care if you're human or part serpent or part anything else. I love you, Elena Crawford, and I want to be your husband." "Are you insane?" David called from a few feet away. Marcus shot him a look. "Probably, but I'm also sure." Grace laughed through her tears. "Boy, you are something else." Marcus turned to Grace. "Will you stand with her?" Grace nodded, wiping her eyes. "Of course I will." Marcus looked around at the few people still lingering. "David, you still got the rings?" David stared at him for a long moment, then slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out the small velvet box. "Yeah, man, I got them." "Then let's do this." They gathered in a small circle in the clearing, just as the last light of day filtered through the trees. There was no officiant, no music, no flowers, just Marcus and Elena, standing face to face, with Grace and David beside them, and a handful of witnesses who'd stayed out of love or curiosity or sheer disbelief at what they were seeing. Elena was still wrapped in the jacket, her hair wild, her feet bare and dirty. Marcus had taken off his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. They looked nothing like the polished couple who were supposed to say their vows in front of 200 people an hour ago. They looked real, raw, human. Marcus took Elena's hands in his. I don't have a speech prepared for this version of today, but I'm going to tell you what I know. I know that you're brave. I know that you've carried something heavy your entire life, and you carried it alone because you thought no one would understand. I know that you're kind and funny, and you make me feel like the best version of myself. And I know that what I saw today doesn't change any of that. You're still you, and I still choose you, every single part of you. Elena's tears came fast, but this time they weren't tears of shame. They were something else: relief, gratitude, love. I don't deserve you, she whispered. Yes, you do, Marcus said firmly, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you believe that. He turned to Grace. Do you have anything you want to say? Grace stepped forward, her voice thick with emotion. In our tradition, when a woman with the serpent's blood chooses a partner, there's a ritual, a vow. She looked at Elena. You have to promise him the truth, always. No more hiding, no more shame. Can you do that? Elena looked at Marcus, then back at her mother. I can. And you, Grace said, turning to Marcus, have to promise her protection. Not from the world, from herself. When she's afraid, when she doubts, when the weight of what she carries feels like too much, you have to remind her that she's not alone. Can you do that? I can, Marcus said without hesitation. Grace nodded. Then by the old ways and the new, I bind you, not just as husband and wife, but as protector and protected. Two halves of one whole. Marcus slipped the ring onto Elena's finger, and she did the same for him, her hands still shaking slightly. David cleared his throat. So, do I say you may kiss the bride, or? Marcus laughed, a real full laugh that broke the tension like sunlight through clouds. Yeah, man, you do. David grinned. Then by the power vested in me by absolutely nobody, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. And Marcus did. He pulled Elena close and kissed her like they were the only two people in the world, and for that moment, they were. When they finally pulled apart, Elena was smiling. A real smile. The kind Marcus had only seen a handful of times. The kind that made her whole face light up. Grace hugged them both, crying and laughing at the same time. The small crowd that remained clapped, hesitantly at first, then louder. And as the sun set completely and the first stars appeared overhead, Marcus and Elena walked back toward the church, hand in hand, forever changed but somehow more whole than they'd ever been. The next few weeks were strange. News of what happened at the wedding spread through Millbrook like wildfire. Some people avoided Elena like she carried a disease. Others were fascinated, asking questions, wanting to know more. A few, mostly older folks who remembered Grace's grandmother, nodded like they'd known all along. Marcus and Elena decided to stay in Millbrook. They could have left, started over somewhere, no one knew them. But Elena was tired of running. She started meeting with Grace more, learning about her heritage, about the stories and rituals that had been passed down. She learned to control her transformations, to shift at will instead of only in moments of panic. It wasn't easy. There were still nights when she woke up terrified, nights when she felt the weight of being different crushing her. But Marcus was there, every single time, reminding her of what Grace had said. She wasn't cursed, she was chosen, and maybe, just maybe, that was something worth accepting. 6 months after their unconventional wedding, Elena and Marcus hosted a small gathering at their home. Friends, family, and a few brave neighbors came. Elena stood in her kitchen, laughing at something David said, and she felt it. That lightness, that sense of belonging she'd spent her whole life chasing. Marcus caught her eye from across the room and she smiled back. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Marcus and Elena sat on their porch, watching the fireflies dance in the darkness. Marcus reached for her hand. "You okay?" Elena nodded. "Yeah, I am. You ever regret it?" "Regret what? Marrying a woman who turns into a giant snake?" Marcus laughed. "Not even once." Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. "Good, because you're stuck with me now." "Forever," Marcus agreed, and he meant it. "So let me ask you something. If you were in Marcus's position, if the person you loved revealed a secret that changed everything you thought you knew about them, would you stay? Would you choose love over fear? Or would you walk away? Leave your answer in the comments. I really want to know what you think. And here's another question. Do you believe some people are born with destinies written into their blood? Do you think Elena's transformation was a curse? Or was it a gift she just needed to accept? Think about the parts of yourself you hide, the things you're afraid to show the world because you think they'll make people see you differently. What would it feel like to be loved anyway? To be seen, fully seen, and still chosen? That's what this story is really about. Not the serpent, not the magic, but the courage it takes to be vulnerable and the power of a love that doesn't flinch. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you feel something real, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, because we're just getting started. Next time, I'm going to tell you about a bride who died on her wedding night and came back 3 days later, demanding her groom fulfill his vows. You think this story was intense? Wait until you hear that one. Until then, thank you for watching. Thank you for staying. And remember, the things that make us different aren't always curses. Sometimes they're the very things that make us extraordinary.